Hi, I'm Leanne. I'm a lightworker and a mother to 3 special girls. I strive to continue learning, growing, and to collect new skills. I'm a psychic medium, Reiki master teacher, and Akashic record reader and energy healer. I am so excited to share what I've learned and what I'm going to learn and the ups and downs of life. Thank you for joining me on my journey. Welcome to Life of a Lightworker podcast. Hello and welcome. This week I talked to David Letterman. He is an inspirational speaker, author, and executive coach. David combines neuroscience, psychology, and ancient wisdoms to help high achievers transform their demanding, volatile workdays into something deeply fulfilling. He is passionate about helping people better navigate the crazy contradictions in the wisdoms of their day by aligning with their unique zone of fulfillment. Thank you, David, for coming. I really appreciate you being on my podcast today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I want to learn more about you. Could you tell me a little about you, how you got to this point in your life?
Yeah, that's a great
It's a big
question.
question.
It is, and I hate answering that question. It's like really tough for me to say. Like people are like, "Who are you? Who do you want to be? Where do you want to be in 10 years?" Like all that. I'm like, I have no idea. Not that I don't like, but my brain goes like in 4,000 directions all at once. Um, who am
Where are you
I?
from? Let's just start there. Where are you from?
I am from Philadelphia originally. I'm a diehard Eagles fan. Um, I grew up in a family of uh, 6 kids. The Brady Bunch, 3 brothers. I mean, 3 sisters, excuse me, 2 brothers. I was the middle child. Um, I was passionate about filmmaking. I wanted to be the next Steven Spielberg and went to LA, went to UCLA. And then I discovered my passion in filmmaking did not jive with my distaste or dislike of the film industry.
Mm.
So I completely went off and did the Peace Corps in Romania, where I live now, actually, and met my wife. And my wife and my daughter are like everything to me. I am a proud girl dad, but I just family has always meant so much to me. And maybe that's because it was a challenging family upbringing and all that I went through. Um, But man, my life's been a wild ride. Professionally, I spent 20 years working in tech and user experience. And for me, I've always seen the world in patterns. Um, and it's funny, only recently um, have I started to see that there's this side of me that's not just the analytical, hardcore techie that I sculpted so well. And a lot of that I attribute to my daughter and the way she showed up in my life. We went through I'm just frank about it and open. We went through hell trying to start a family, lost 2 pregnancies in ways I wouldn't wish on anybody. And I experienced emotions that I don't, most people I think would struggle with, but especially being a man who wasn't very connected to his body and his emotions and stuff, like it was just way more than I could handle. Um, and then finally getting to hold my daughter in my hands, I thought, okay, cool, we're good. Everything's good. I got her finally, after years and years of struggle. And then everything unraveled professionally. Marriage almost ended. I had an entrepreneurial venture on the side of my busy tech career that was about to, like all these things sort of collided together and put me, um, put me in a state where it's like, okay, everything you think you understand about life is about to change. And in a way that's going to take a long time to really unravel. But that led me to explore all these different bodies of wisdom and perspectives. Um, and so that's why it's so tough for me to answer that question. Because I'm like, there's a part of me that's like diehard dad, husband. There's the part of me that, has huge aspirations to bridge these worlds of, um, I guess what I didn't say was being a user experience guy. It's all about looking at how desired outcomes or intentions, whether using an app or a website or even just in real life, you're like, okay, I want this to happen. So I'm taking this action. I have these expectations. What's the outcome? And why aren't they adding up? And what I found was most of the advice out there about living a good life, being fulfilled, made no sense. It totally contradicted one another. There's all this advice out there that I'm happy to get into those contradictions. Um, but it led me to see that as the ultimate UX problem. And out of my own need to dig myself out of the hole that I was in, I started interviewing people like I would a usability test for a website. And that led me to just explore every rock I ever knew, turn everything upside down and go, I got to get to the bottom of this. And that's led me to explore ancient indigenous wisdom. I was already into psychology, mindfulness, neuroscience, but I got into yoga and all these other things. But the way my brain works is they all fit together in a way that we don't really talk about.
Mm.
And that in our soundbite social media crazed world never gets any surface area to actually be talked about. And so anyway, I come back to you asked me, tell me about you. And I'm like, it's been a wild past. Right now, life's in this interesting sort of transition state. Um, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
Well, we're multifaceted, and our path weaves and bends and turns, and who you
Amen.
are
Yes.
now wasn't who you are before, and that's the way, well, I feel like that's the way we're meant to be.
Yeah.
It's not usually a straight path, and there's weaves and
Mhm.
turns. That's how we get a full experience.
Very much
So
so.
I I really liked how you were talking about weaving those two sides that together, the like the neurological, the psychological, and then the more um, spiritual side. How, what are some ways in your daily life or things that you strive to do to help weave those together?
Well, that's what I've actually switched my whole focus in my career. So I spend my days coaching, executives, leaders, doing talks, and I have a book coming out on this because when it comes to fulfillment and when I talk about fulfillment, I that means a lot of different things. And at the end of the day, when I talk about fulfillment, I don't mean it in the way it's often spoken about, which is a sense of accomplishment. I set a goal. If I make it happen, I feel fulfilled. That to me is a fleeting kind of fulfillment. What I'm talking about is when you look your child in the eye for the first time and you feel this incredible sense of awe, and your whole body fills up with something that you cannot put words to, but you know it. Or when you look at somebody and you suddenly register, wait, this person isn't like all the other people I've dated, and you fill up with something. Or even when you're in pursuit of a goal, when you lose sight of the sort of egoic aspects of it and really are just in that pure creative energy. I don't just mean flow state like being productive, but just in that whole process of exploring and working through stuff and so forth. Again, like we fill up with something. And the word fulfilled, I love because full and it's like full and filled. It's like English is saying, guys, you really should pay attention to this because I'm not just going to give you, it's like, it's like, I'm trying to think of an example now where if you were to literally double up words, it's like speed fast. Like imagine that was a word. It's like I get it. You're going fast, right? But we're like full and filled. And to me, at the end of the day, I truly believe that's what life's about. I love Joseph Campbell, and he says like we're like everyone's making life so complicated. He's like we're here to just like embrace sort of the rapture of being alive. I love it.
Mm.
Rapture of being alive, right? And so when you ask that question, the reason why I go into that little bit of a tangent is most people, and now this is my user experience brain coming online, we overlook the current state that we're in, which is we're usually exhausted. We're pulled in a million different directions. We're trying to take these soundbite wisdoms that we hear that say things like, I should say yes to radical self-care and say no to people, set up boundaries. But, I should give more of myself. I get by giving and so forth. And I should stay the course to, make my dreams come true. But I need to stop and smell the roses. Like all that's going on. And then it's like, okay, cool. So how do I mix these things together in a practical way? And I actually say one of the first things you can do is just pause and recognize how crazy the user experience is of trying to squeeze something in for 2 minutes a day without waking up to the bigger contradictions that
Mm.
life is trying to get us to wake up to. So I could give you a short, little response that says, you know what, just for the first 15 minutes of your day, right when you open your eyes, take a moment and release that conditioning or just recognize it first. And once you recognize it, you can see, okay, is this really going to serve me in the rest of my day to go? I need to start worrying about what I need to do, get my kids out of bed or whatever else. all the stuff I didn't get to yesterday, all the things I'm worried about doing today? Or can I just take 10, 15 minutes and whatever it is that my heart truly wants in this moment, allow myself that grace to have that expansiveness and so forth? Because what that does is it opens up just a tiny bit of space to begin to hopefully see more moments where it goes, it's not that we need to add more integration points in our day. We need to remove the things that are getting in the way of that happening more than anything else, right? And so I always tell people like the best way to actually start is pick one thing to stop or do a little bit less, and then have fun with whatever space opens up there. There's a lot more you can say to that. In fact, that's why my book's called Trust Life, and it's all about overcoming the four critical paradoxes, the contradictions and the wisdoms of our day that no one's talking about, that drove me nuts. And the way to bridging these paradoxes is actually uncovering and building a relationship to it. I call the four critical breakthroughs, which are at the root of all these wisdoms out there, are these four simple sounding truths, wisdoms, whatever you want to call it, that span every body of wisdom out there. And our job is to build relationship to it again and again and again and again and again. So it goes from just a conceptual understanding to an embodied way of being. And the first one is release. And I tell people, you start by stopping. You start by creating space. That's what nature does. It's what our bodies try to do when we're not, getting in the way and so forth. So my long-winded answer would be pick one thing that you go, okay, this isn't going to help me, or it's not going to help me in the way I'm going to do it. And I'm just going to give myself a little bit of space here to then play with whatever opens up in that.
I love that. Because you can't, of course, you always hear like you can't fill a cup that is already full. You have to take some of it out in order to put what you want into it. And I love how you brought up that nature does that, because like natural forest fires, it clears the way so that the new growth can come. And you can only take on what you're able to physically, emotionally, mentally hold. You have to release what you don't want to be carrying around with you. Like you have this big full backpack. It's going to be hard to walk through life or walk towards where you want to go if it's like dragging you down. What if you don't need that? So I really love how you're asking people just to create a little bit of space, because that's not daunting. It's not overwhelming. It's manageable.
Our words are very important. And I love the analogy you use, because I actually use that in my book. Because the first paradox that I was running into was in 2015, when all that stuff was colliding in my life. I was literally trying desperately, like for a year. My weight got out of control. I had back pain issues, major OCD as a child that I thought I had gotten, I'd taken care of, roared back to life. And I'm literally like, the harder I'm trying to make things better, the worse things are getting. And I just got to a point where literally physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, I'm spent. And I'm looking around at all this advice and all these books, because I was my blessing and my curse is like I will stop at nothing once I set my mind to something. And especially because it impacted my family, it's like take that and multiply it by 1,000, percent as far as the motivation and inspiration. And yet here I am at a point where I'm like, I got nothing left in my tank. And every bit of advice out there is asking me to use time I don't have with energy that doesn't exist, to try to foster some new habit that might yield results weeks after I need them. And the thing is, I always ask people, again, this is where I love user experience in my training, and that is the beauty of patterns. And when you really tune into the patterns of your life, they can help us wake up and remove some of the bias and the subjectivity that we have and get a little bit more objective. And I like to take patterns and go, well, wait, if it's crazy in one context, but not another, is that our own bias? And if I were to take those same exact patterns that I just described to you, not enough time, not enough energy, just put your head down and keep, sucking it up and doing the same thing. It's no different than, imagine like the car repair person pulling up beside your car as you're sitting there on the side of the road. You got no gas in your tank. There's steam coming out of your engine. And the car repair person says, don't worry, I'm here. I got you. All I need you to do is drive another 20 miles up the road to the station, and then we'll take good care of you. And you'd be like, that's insane, right? Yeah. Like imagine the Google reviews that person would get, right?
Yeah, it sounds ridiculous.
It is ridiculous, right? But we play that for some reason. We've
Mm.
been sold a story and buy into it that says that's the only way to do things. And I remember going like, life continues to make all of us get to a stopping point, not because it's getting in our way, because it's trying to get us to not like when I first heard create time, I was like, I don't like that's an addition in a way. My
Mm.
brain registered it as that versus going, let me actually do something that defies logic, because these paradoxes ask us to shift our perspective in a way that defies our logical sort of misunderstandings. And the backpack example is great. If you have a backpack on you and that's your current state and you're wearing, and let's say it's 100 pounds and you're exhausted, you've been on a hike throughout your day, your life, whatever it is. And then suddenly you take half the weight out of that backpack. Suddenly it's like, whoa, like you have energy come out of nowhere. And in a way, you're going to probably go a little bit faster because of that energy. And so you have more time than you would have had compared to had you not. So just like that, you actually can create time and energy out of nothing in a way that defies our logic, but begins to open the door that's very different than I have my whole schedule here. On top of that, at midnight, once my everything's done, I'm going to give myself 5 additional minutes. There's a foundational difference between those two approaches. One is release, one's trying to squeeze in.
Yeah. Yeah. They're very different energies, but on the surface, they kind of feel, they might look the same, but they're very different. One's very
Exactly.
much like that go, 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 hustle, squeeze as much as you can in. And then the other one's, how can I do less? Which is very opposite.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I really like that. That's really good visual. And I think that's really helpful for a lot of people. Um, when you started to realize that creating more space in your life, doing less, was something you wanted to try or lean towards, um, what gave you that idea? Was it something that you just meditated on or something you just noticed because you were seeing patterns? I'm curious how that idea that came about for you.
Honestly, what comes to mind is so I was with my book in general, and just at the time, I wasn't even trying to write a book. I was trying to just explore these conundrums for myself. And my daughter has been so much of an inspiration for me. And I can still picture it. There's actually a picture I took of it because it just caught me. We're walking, and she was 1.5, 2 at the time. And just this adorable little dinky kid moving around the neighborhood and stuff. And she's full of life naturally and all that, especially as you know, most 1.5, 2-year-olds are. And she's just going, going, going. And she just literally just stops in front of some random house in the neighborhood, right in front of their driveway, and just lays down. And I'm like, okay. And she was cute. And I take a picture. She's like, Daddy, lay down with me.
Mm.
And I was like, it just was like, okay. So I lay down next to her. And what caught me was just not the abruptness, but just like, I'm just stopping. I'm just stopping. And I was working on, for me, it's always this intuitive kind of evolution that where it's like I'm struggling with something and then something happens and I feel this hit that says, note this, like there's something here. And what stuck in my mind was you start by stopping. That's the phrase that popped in my head in that moment. And then I do a lot of work taking people into nature. I love nature connection, not just for hiking, but like literally connecting deeply to the land around you. And, you know, when nature wants to create space, something dies.
Mm.
And death can be this horrific, morbid thing, but it also can be this beautiful thing that actually creates space for rebirth and something even more incredible. And um, and so that's how that came about. It was just this moment with my daughter where I'm viscerally feeling it and just going like, we literally just stop. Like you can literally just stop.
Mm.
And the key thing with stopping that's so challenging is that we're so conditioned to give things up. And for example, like in my family, even myself, I said I just struggle with weight. So here I am trying to give up calories to portion control. And I'm not going to make this a whole big thing about dieting and stuff, but the problem that I found with my own struggles with dieting was my what my body was wanting me to do more than anything else was stop that constant state of constriction. And I'll never forget one time sitting down and going, okay, because again, I'm like, I'm crazy. I'm going to explore every pattern once I see something. I got to not just take somebody's word for it. And so I'd always heard binging was bad. And I remember I was like, okay, I'm going to do this approach where somebody said, be good for 5 days. And on the weekends, turn the valve off so you don't deprive yourself. And I would do that. And I was like, this just is making my relationship with food like screwed up. That's how I felt. I'm not, that works for others. Great. All the more power to them. But I remember sitting there going like, I just would have these moments where it's like, I just want to go crazy with food. And my kryptonite was Reese's peanut butter cups, Ben and Jerry's, who are my best friends. Like I remember going like, something's off here. And so I remember going one day, all right, I'm going to allow myself to basically line my counter up with every possible food I want. So there's no resistance whatsoever. And the only, what's the word, rule I had was I could eat whatever I wanted, however long I wanted, but I had to be totally aware as I did so. That was it. I wasn't trying to have an epiphany or whatever else. I just had to be present to it. No phone, no looking at, TV while I'm doing so. I'm just going to savor every freaking bite. And I'll never forget because the first bite, man, it was glorious. But it was glorious because in a way it was like something had been missing until that point. The second bite, really good, not as glorious, but pretty amazing. The third bite, it was almost like a car driving it off the lot and the value starts to go down a lot. Like the value I got from each bite was less. And by the time I got to like the fifth and sixth bite, suddenly the joy I was having from eating it was starting to be overshadowed by the guilt and shame around, wait, I'm eating stuff I shouldn't be eating. And I quickly realized, I was like, wait a second, this whole experience is a form of release. It's not the best serving one, but that's all it is. And so I found that here I am struggling day in and day out, trying to do things where I'm squeezing to add more time in my day and so forth, which is just making me that much more wound up to the point I need to release in other ways. And so all of that to say that it was something where, yeah, it's one of those things where when you begin to really tune into the dynamics directly and stop taking everybody else's what you should and shouldn't and just for yourself, see, your body's like, it can be very, very different.
And we're all so different that all these other advices, they're very few that actually may work for you because everyone's so different. And I agree that being able to listen to your body, spending time to kind of tune into your body and get to know your body, because so many of us are so numb. We're always watching TV. We're always on our phone. We're always doing things that distract us, keep our attention away from our bodies. But when we listen to our bodies, they have a lot to say. So I think I really like that you brought that up because it's something that I've noticed, especially it's becoming more and more aware or more and more in my awareness around me that so many people just don't know their body.
Yeah.
Like if something hurts, they might be like, oh, this kind of hurts, but they can't even describe the pain or they can't really focus in on it and see where it might be stemming from. Or that's not a skill that we're taught. We're actually taught to completely ignore it and shut it out. So it makes sense that so many people, they might feel something, but they don't know what it is. So they're like, oh, well, I'm just going to eat. I'm just going to go do something else. And they don't actually know why they're doing it.
It's confusing as heck. Our conditioning makes it really challenging. And then the other thing, when I work with people, I help people try to operationalize fulfillment because it's really hard to make it practical. And I found for me, at least, and my clients, what's really helpful is helping them understand there's this thing that I call their zone of fulfillment. It's unique to each one of us. And any minute of any day is an opportunity to step deeper into that. So now it's not, how do I get through this toxic meeting or this crappy time in traffic or, rushing through this so I can then get to, spend time with my child or whatever else. It's like in whatever moment we're in, there's an opportunity to have it be very, very fulfilling. there's a lot more to say to that. But what I wanted to pull out was if you think of a Venn diagram with three spheres, our zone of fulfillment, there's two parts that are really, really often talked about in isolation, and they work together. And that's part of why, in some ways, for anyone out there who feels overwhelmed by the thought of connecting to our body, especially if you were like me, I was very sensitive as a
Mm-hmm.
child. And I would feel things, and I learned that was a very strong intuition. I didn't know anything about it. I grew up in a family of medical professionals, and nothing against the medical field, but it was very much the what you see in front of you is all there is, and don't ask weird questions and things like that. And so it was like, keep that away. But that is what fueled my OCD because that energy had to come out somewhere. And the thing is that we have two forces that are in a way paradoxical, but they create the inner, I don't want to call it tension, but the inner energy we need to ultimately move something forward. And so if you think of it, there's a, like, again, that Venn diagram, there's a sphere that I call of our, that which we are right now. You are cells, you are emotions, you are thoughts, you are conditioned habits, you are traumas, you are certain ways of being sensitive, right? Some are more, like my wife, when she tracks with her back, actually, right? Me and some people track more with their sound in terms of intuitive hits and how they know, to connect to the moment and so forth. There's all these different ways. Like you said, we're all so different, right? All of that makes up who and what we are now. And the degree to which we're connected to that is part of that. But at the same time, this is something I learned from the indigenous perspectives that I've been trained in. We're we're literally in this moment like a flower that's also growing into something simultaneously. And in these cultures, the term that best sort of describes what they all sort of speak to is this thing called our medicine. We each have this medicine. And medicine sounds like, oh, I mean, I'm sick or whatever. Think of medicine as you have innate ways of seeing, feeling, thinking, and engaging the world around you. And when you align with that authentically and fully, you are medicine for everything around you and yourself. I have a saying, I have a belief, I don't have a way to prove this, but I believe that nature is so healing to people because the weeds, the insects, and the trees are all fully embracing their medicine. And that's why the moment you walk into nature, it's like, whoa. But most of us have been conditioned to A, have no relationship to that, and B, embody ways of being that are in complete opposition to that.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of this is going on at once, and people can't see my hands, but it's like, imagine like not fist fighting, but it's like this stuff trying to come out of it. So it's overwhelming as all heck, like you said. And a lot of times we feel that as children, and then we're like, we need a way to keep that under wraps. And so we either disconnect, we distract ourselves, all kinds of reasons. And I know for me, I turned to my head. I just would get lost in my head, so it's not easy for sure. But once you begin to understand why it is, and how it's played out, it's like, oh, okay, I'm not crazy.
Yeah, it's unlearning and untwisting all the things that we did to ourselves, but also other people encouraged us to do or believe, to like cover, to make the world more manageable, I guess, because we didn't have the environments to support
Yeah,
us the way that we can support ourselves now.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I love because when you were talking about nature and everything kind of working together, I was just kind of feeling that for a moment. And there is a big energy difference between like a garden or maybe more of something that's created in a city that people have planted and cultivated, and then something wild. Very different. Like, yes, in the city where there's trees, that's still healing, that still helps you ground, but it's very different from something wild. It's just completely different, off the charts. It's not really that comparable. They're just totally different experiences, even though they're both plants. And I feel that when people kind of more embrace their true selves, we work together like that forest. One of us is the weed, one of us is the flower, one of us is the tree, and then we all work together. We're not really I guess in the wild, you are kind of competing a little bit, but to the healthy level where you're helping each other grow to be the
Mhm.
best you can be, not competing so you're stomping each other out. And I feel like
That's,
that's like the way we're supposed to be. We were designed to be, ideally, originally.
I
Um,
think you hit the, it's funny, just right before this, I was finishing a documentary on, I was a huge Chicago Bulls fan with Michael Jordan when he was at his prime. That was when I was, in high school and basketball. I loved it. And it was interesting because I use him a lot of times and Tom Brady as an example to talk about how, because I work with a lot of high achievers. And I say those people talk about fulfillment. And it's like, there's a cost to winning, and there is as far as the work and the things you've got to do. But I ask, I'm like, why is it that every day until like all that mattered was at the end, did you get the trophy or not? It's a very transactional
mhm,
relationship with competition, if you will, right? And becoming better. And lo and behold, a lot of these athletes and amazing figures that we see in magazines and on the news and so forth, day in and day out, it's a very unfulfilling life, right? And that's not to criticize or take away from what they accomplished. But at the end of the day, if you're accomplishing something in a way that's not fulfilling, personally, I don't admire that as much as somebody who can be successful, even if it means a little bit less, what you might measure a little bit less successful, because what we're failing to take into account are the ripple effects that move around. And that third sphere that I didn't mention earlier in that zone of fulfillment is everything that's unfolding around you.
mhm,
And that's where humans, I think, especially with competition, have kind of screwed things up because they don't take that into account too often. It's, I set my goal, I'm going to freaking bully my way through, bulldoze my
mhm,
way through, and I'm going to get to that finish line. And being from Philadelphia, I can admire and appreciate that aspect of human consciousness, the drive and the determination, but it has to be measured and balanced by something that also takes into account a concept again from these indigenous cultures that's all about right relationship.
mhm,
And so if you're doing something but sending out ripple effects in a way where it's actually causing more harm than not, you're going to have a situation in which, okay, you hoist the trophy up and then there's total um, destruction or problems afterwards. That's why teams for decades afterwards go through a rebuild that never ends, and you have all these kinds of unintended consequences. And what ends up happening oftentimes is we have normalized those. We have said that's okay. That's the cost of being good. But what you just said was, and I love the way you said it, it's like competition, the weeds, like nature is competing, but it's doing it in a way where there's a, first of all, dance and elegance to it. And it's meant to make everybody better. There's a practice that I do with people when I'm in groups. It's a great game. And it's really awesome if you ever get a chance to do this, to connect to your body and begin to sense how your intuition speaks to you. It's called
mhm,
bat and moth. And so one person gets in the center and is blindfolded. And there's, you need maybe 15 to 20 minimum people around the circle to help hold the space. And then there's, depending on the size of the circle, you could have anywhere from 3 to 6 other people step in who aren't blindfolded, who are the moths. And the moths can run around, and their job is to not get caught by the bat. And the bat can move around, and they're trying to catch people. Um, and when they say bat, all the moths have to say moth. So there's a bit of echolocation
mhm,
going on. And what's funny is most people when they do this, and this happened for me the first time I did it, um, when I did it, I'm sitting here using my left brain. I'm trying to be competitive. I'm gonna run and catch people and all that. And the thing is that 9 out of 10 times you're not, because the circle's so big and the moths can move, you're always gonna be a step behind everybody, and you're gonna be exhausted, and you're eventually not gonna catch anybody unless somebody trips, right?
right.
And eventually the circle gets smaller, and then eventually there's less room, and you catch people. But there's a certain point when people do it, especially when they do it more than once, where they start to wake up to the fact that you're not meant to do it that way.
Mhm,
It's a very human, left brain, overly logical way of trying to do something that's actually not the way nature does it. And I remember the first time my mentor did it, and I'm like, he's this tall, kind of lanky guy, and we kind of had this, not competitive thing, but this, we both love nature and all that. And I was like, all right, I'm going to be a moth. There's no way he's going to catch me. I'm going to be the last one of this group of six. And he sits there and he's blindfolded, his back's to me, facing me. So I'm about 6 feet behind him. And he just gets real quiet the first time he does it. I mean, he just takes a breath and there's no sound. He's not saying anything. Everyone's just standing there. Like, what the hell is this guy doing? And then I kid you not, and this was at the time that I was starting to get into a particular lineage of shamanism and learning about that helped me connect to my body. And I still had a long way to go, but I was just starting to really notice things in my body. And I swear to God, I can't explain it, but all of a sudden I felt as if this string came out of him, wrapped around and like connected to like my center. And I was like, holy crap, I feel like he just locked onto me. Now there's 5 other moths there, right? Like you're smiling, and I was like partly smiling because I'm like, this is really cool. And I'm also terrified because I'm like, this can't be, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden he says bat, and we say moth, and we start moving and all that. And I swear to God, in like record time, looking like a ninja, just almost dancing his way through, he's on to me. And he's even people are moving around and all that. He's like ignoring them somehow and just following me around. Didn't matter where I went. And freaking, I was like, F and A, excuse my French, but it was like he wouldn't, it was like a heat-seeking missile that would not let me go. And at the end, it was funny because there was a certain point, and this is something that the facilitator actually drew our attention to, where I just knew I'm going to be caught. And in the past, when I did that, I was like, oh, this sucks. And there was a part of me that was like, almost like good game, like, okay, you got me. And that's something that in nature, I think is respected when it comes to competition, whereas sometimes we can go so far where it's like, we don't we don't honor the loss. We don't honor it's winning only and so forth. So anyway, I know I went off on a tangent, but
Oh, no, I love that.
it's a great thing because I remember this when I did it the next time. I was like, I don't care if I catch people. I'm going to try to just connect,
Mm-hmm.
and that's when my connection with my body and my intuition just like quantum leaped because I was like, whoa, like I can actually sense and track in ways that I never thought in a million years I could do. It was cool.
Yeah, like it in nature, it's the experience, it's not winning.
Yeah.
So anytime that I've done any energy readings for any type of nature thing or a past life thing for anything in nature, not just like a human, it's very much, it's not about doing the best at something. It's all about, I am here in this moment. What is happening around me? What am I getting from this? What am I learning from this? It has nothing to do with, oh, I'm the last one there. I survived.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a little bit for some things, but that's not the main goal.
Mm-hmm.
It's so I like how that game kind of brings out that it's the experience, it's the learning, and each time you can like level up and try to do things a little different and experiment. It's not just about I shall win.
Mm-hmm.
And through the experience of just experiencing it, you might just win. But if your focus is I'm going to win in nature, that doesn't really jive. It's kind of just in this human world that we've created where that could be a successful thing, because that's not a successful thing in the rest of the world with plants or animals. It's not completely different matrices.
Well, that's where you need that third dimension to it. That's why, to me, the zone of fulfillment is so powerful. I'm not saying it's the end all be. I'm just saying when we think of it in
Mm-hmm.
those terms, if we just chase after our dreams and don't honor the trauma, the truth, the like, even that positive or that toxic positivity, if we're not honoring what's alive in us now, it doesn't work. At the same time, if we just dwell in that and don't go after our dreams, we don't get anywhere. There's no evolution. And if we do any of that with no regard or little regard for what is actually unfolding around us and doing that in right relationship with nature, with others, I can't tell you how many times in my own life, especially first when I was starting to really have to not just understand this, but embody it. I tell people all the time now, it's like, I love disruption that I don't control because that's life signaling something for me. I don't know necessarily need to know what it is, but it's something that's there that is feedback for me to take in instead of what I used to do, which is this is getting in the way. I got to push even harder, get more stressed and so forth. And I ask people, I go, look at your life and look at the collective and what humans have done as a whole. Incredible amounts of individual success. But when it comes to that success, again, why do you think there's always a cost? There's a cost when we're not taking into account all three of those dimensions. And that's why there's so much success out there, but very little fulfillment,
Mm.
you know?
It's not
So
the holistic view. You're not, when you find success in something that your soul, your heart is like passionate about and is like pulling you to explore, then yes, you get fulfillment out of that. But when it's something that just society says you should do this and you chase that, you don't have that soul level, the energy level that can bring you joy. So there's the lacking. There's like the emptiness. So being fully rounded is really important for our own happiness.
I would say be fully rounded in terms of what you're going after and how you're going after it too, because
Yep.
that's the part that often gets overlooked. My wife, even I, to a certain extent, and a lot of my clients, like one of the patterns that was really hard for me to kind of crack at first is why are all these people working in their passion space burning out?
Mm,
Because technically they're inspired,
right.
right? But that's where there's more to it than just the I'm aligned with something inside. There's a whole world around us that's part of us in a way. It's feedback, and again, I just come back to how you said it so eloquently and simply, but succinctly. It's like the weeds, the bees, the flies, the flowers, the trees. They're they're doing their thing, but they're doing it in relationship to everything else.
Mhm.
And there's nothing more inspiring than that. And if there's anybody, you know, I tell people, let's let history really kind of not determine what was successful and what it wasn't, but when it comes to some of these concepts, and people hear me sometimes say like, "Oh, you do indigenous stuff?" Because I work with like people in corporate, and not that all people in corporate aren't open to this, but a lot of times it's like, what does that have to do with, give me the neuroscience, give me that kind of stuff, and I'll say, well, I'm not out to sit here and get into anything that's going to make you feel uncomfortable, but at the end of the day, if there are cultures that have been around for tens of thousands of years, you know how hard it is to get a team of 5 people all on the same page for 5 minutes. And when you have civilizations that are often considered in history books like the most successful as far as length of existence, like the Roman Empire that was 1,000 years compared to like 20,000 years, like the Kalahari Bushmen, it's like maybe there's some wisdom in there that's worth tuning into. And putting humans aside, nature's been around a hell of a lot longer than any of us. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
So it's like nature's doing something. We might want to tune into that. So but yeah, I really liked how I'm just sitting with the visual because when you
yeah,
said it about the competition, because that's one of the challenging things to do, is not give up that drive to evolve and be better, but not do it at the expense of everything else.
yeah. Have it be a collaborative. And an idea, a thought just came in. Because society, we as a people for quite a long time have been trying to force nature to be more like us. But if we started looking at nature and how we could be more like nature, the world would change so much. And I feel like in the future, there's going to be more of a push or more of a drive for people to try to emulate more of that natural rhythm. And I'm kind of excited to see, well, it might not be this life, but eventually I'll see how that plays out and how we can work more collaboratively with each other, but also nature. Um, I think that'd be beautiful instead of
Mm,
the way that we have been doing things, which obviously hasn't turned out great. Just to see where we are now. So that's, you know, some hope for the future,
mm,
anyways, right? Because nature can
mhm.
rebuild, so can we.
I agree. Amen. Yeah, I agree with that 1,000%. And I think that's going to happen.
Yep.
There's I forget the tribe. Um, they talk about first level creation, which is very much the spiritual side, the thing that goes beyond the words, the stuff that goes beyond words, the experiences, the energy, the wu wei, the flow, the intelligence that's there. And then after that, there's second level creation, which was, okay, now we put logic and words and all that to things. And the moment you say a tree is a tree, you minimize it so much and you box it into
Mm.
something, you know? And there's a purpose that there is benefit to that, right? There's a lot of good that comes from that. We have to honor that aspect of ourselves and the universe. Um, and they say that there's going to be a third level creation, which is the integration of those
Mm.
two. And in some ways, that gives me a bit of what's the word? Comfort, because I feel like it's almost like the pendulum. We started over here, it's gone all the way over here, and then it'll be that integration point. But in some ways, that's our journey. Our journey is to find that for ourselves. At least that's what my experience has been, and it's not easy, but it feels a heck of a lot more aligning.
Yeah, it's not an easy experience. The easy thing would just be to stay zoned out. Honestly, that's the quote unquote easy path, but it's deadening.
Hmm.
I feel like that path, like for me personally, it just
Yeah.
quiets and like deadens that part of yourself that brings joy. And I feel that the joy is one of the most powerful and sacred things about us, and
Mhm.
encouraging it through, and then I'm going to say at whatever cost, but the cost is just the hard work. It's the looking at your shadows
Yeah,
and
it's the
not
shedding.
ignoring
Yeah.
them. And
Yeah.
then from there, you can be more joyful. And that's my personal belief on that.
Mm. I love how even as you described that, your hands were almost like I saw the visual I got was you're holding your hands was almost a flame. Like there is this
Mm-hmm.
flame in us, and
Mm-hmm.
it's powerful as all heck. And that's why burnout to me is so interesting. And I did several years of Kriya yoga, so under the teachings of Yogananda, and he said if humans got out of their own way in a way, I'm paraphrasing, of course, when I
Yes.
say this, it's like if we stop fighting ourselves and embrace those innate natural ways. Um, he's like the power, the energy that we have in us is so profound.
Mm-hmm.
But we're fighting that constantly, consciously or not.
Yes. Yes.
And it's exhausting, and when I work with executives, I said, you can blame your boss, you can blame your workload, but the real reason you're burning out is that tension that's never
Mm.
not been there,
Yeah.
and it works miracles once we get out of the way and align with it.
Well, imagine that all the energy, all the thoughts, all the work that you put to putting yourself in that box, if you could take that energy and put it to something like expanding yourself or doing something joyful or anything, how powerful that would be. Because I think that just proves that we as people are super powerful.
Yeah.
We can do so many things, but in recent history, we've been using that to control ourselves and each other. And it just when you think about it that way, it just feels silly. Like, why are we doing that to ourselves? But obviously, when you're in it, it's super hard. Like, we are all experiencing it. It's not easy to go against that programming that we've had and those experiences that we've had that have helped mold us into who we are, making those scripts within ourselves. So, yeah, it's lots of food for thought and lots of things to ponder. And
Mhm.
the more you have in your brain, the more, like I say, the more new ideas that come in that help challenge the ideas you have, the more chances that you might expand your view. And
Well said. Yeah.
yes, I like expanding my view and I like new thoughts. So I really like talking to you. So I've been liking all these ideas that have been coming into my head as you've been talking, and
Mm.
all these new different perspectives. It's been really
Mm.
wonderful.
Very
Thank you
cool.
very much.
Mhm.
Um, I would love to hear about, you said you're writing your book, but I know you also have a children's book.
Mm.
Could could you talk a little bit about this children's book you have, one has been released. Is that correct? Or
Well, it's we're waiting to get the short answer is yes. It has been
okay.
released. It's not available yet for sale,
Mm.
or I should say delivery yet. We're in the process of working that
Mm.
out, but in
Pre-order.
literally the week or two. Yeah, I
Okay.
guess is the technical term. I'm new
Okay.
to this, completely new.
Oh, good.
So, yeah, so it's funny because as I was going through and transforming my life and making sense of these conundrums and paradoxes and 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 just understanding so much more, there's a natural inclination that we all have, which is like, I wish I knew this when I was younger. And in some
Mm.
ways, I feel like everyone has to go through their own story. It doesn't mean you sit there and just leave the same, impediment for everybody to have to trip over.
Oops.
Um, but it's something where with my daughter, she inspired me to change in so much, in so many ways. And I wanted I wanted to share with her some of the stuff that I was, learning about. But I didn't know what to do. I wasn't out to go do a book or anything like that. Um, and it was funny how, again, the timing just works. My stepmom, she got us, I thought it was around 3.5. She got her this kids illustrated book that was kind of, I don't remember what it was called, but it was something like they had all these amazing female figures from history. Amelia Earhart, all these amazing, amazing women. And it was something like where they had this sort of cartoonish picture of them, that, a little kid's gonna, you know, um, find appealing. And then a little bit of a tiny little message like, see, so and so flew from here to there and see, she can do it too. And the whole context was like women are strong and powerful and so forth. But I remember getting it, and I was like, I had this visceral frustration with it. I was like, I do not want my daughter to even look at it. I let her while, she was talking to my stepmom, but afterwards I told my wife, I'm like, I don't want her to have this. And she's like, why? And I said, because my daughter doesn't yet have a story that there's any difference.
Mm.
There's no difference between a man and a woman. There's no difference with her and anybody else, honestly, right now. So I don't want to put that in there. I love celebrating people for what they did, but not because it's like, oh, they can also do it too. So that was kind of already in me. And then my daughter one day was like, Daddy, as we were getting ready for bed, she's like, can you tell me a story? And at the time, I was really working with a mentor of mine who was a nature-based coach and really helping me go deeper into learning about some of these indigenous cultures. And storytelling in these cultures is used to help children grow up. But the stories they tell are not like the beginning, the happy beginning, middle, and end thing that are like, okay, did you get the meaning? You got the one takeaway, great. These are stories where it's like, you might hear it one day and be irritated with it. You might hear it the next day and totally be like, oh, it's the most amazing thing in the world. And with children's versions of it, it's not necessarily as, what's the word? I don't want to say triggering, but it might not be as strong a reaction, but it's something where it's more nuanced.
Mm.
And I was like, you know what? I would love to play with some of those qualities from these indigenous perspectives in a way in which we could take some of these learnings that aren't like so one dimensional, because that's the other thing. I saw a lot of books that it's like, okay, cool, you want to teach your kid empathy? It's like Jane hits Joe, Joe gets upset, Joe talks to Jane, blah, 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 blah. Nothing wrong with that, but I'm like, man, our imagination and the way our whole system wants to work wants a story. For the same
Mm.
reason we go to the movies and see a figure like I'm a Marvel fan, so it's like I see Doctor Strange and I'm like, yes, that's what I want to learn my lessons in a way. So she and I sat there and I was like, okay, so do you want it to be, the main character? What do you want it to be? She's like, I want it to be a girl. Great. What name? She picked a name. Pick an animal. She picked an animal and it was a zebra. It's like, okay, cool. What super quality do you want it to have? Like amazing thing. And my daughter, we were honestly nervous she was going to jump out of a window when she was like 4 because she's always wanted to fly without wings,
Mm.
right? And so the character, so Chava is this girl who's very brave, very confident, very willing to go on adventure and stuff. Um, Her best friend's a zebra named Poofy. And the name Poofy, she just came up with. She's like, Poofy. I was like, okay. And Poofy's very, very scared, very, very timid. And so they go on this adventure for the first book where they're running out of magical firewood. They have to go to this, it only grows in the deepest, furthest corner of the forest that surrounds the whole village. No one else can find it, but Chava has this intuitive sense, I can do it. And her grandmother, who's not alive in the series, but has told her all these stories and legends and stuff, she recalls that, and that helps her, you know, find her way. And so anyway, they're having this, they're stuck in this huge rainstorm. And Poofy looks up to the clouds and it's all wet and cold. And Poofy has this thought that doesn't think anything more to it than just a thought of like, I wish I could fly above the clouds. And so Chava was told a story about, from her grandmother, told her a story about a zebra that could fly. So she starts telling her this story. And Poofy is like, a zebra that can fly? What are you, crazy? Zebras don't fly. Like, you walk on the ground. That's what we do. And I remember with my daughter, I was like, I just, as we were working through this story, like we kind of co-created it on the spot. Um, we wanted to have the strengths of one and the weakness of the other balance each other out. So Poofy learns and discovers that she can fly because Chava, who's brave, basically when Poofy's like, okay, well, all right, maybe I could try, but like, what if I can't? And Poofy or Chava looks at her and just says, but what if you can? Right? It's like the ultimate change. So now Poofy learns she can fly. They can fly to the forest, but then when they get to the forest, the humans haven't taken care of it. And it's not magical at all, even though it's supposed to be this magical forest. And now the roles kind of reverse. And now Chava is so overwhelmed with it. We called it a big feeling because that's what my daughter was going through at the time. These starting to have these big tantrums. And it was like, okay, how do we talk about it without making it so mental? And we had it where it's like, okay, well, Poofy may be scared, but she, when it comes to her emotions, is actually really strong but not strong in a this way. Like, yeah, it's okay to have a big feeling, and I can hold that space. So anyway, even though it sounds like really grown-uppy, it's not. But at the same time, we wanted it to be something where um, grown-ups could get something out of it, and kids could get something out of it, all around this incredible friendship that was helping my daughter go through something she was struggling with. And then she literally wanted to hear this story every single night for an entire year. I'm not exaggerating at all. It was like, Daddy, tell me about having pooping. I'm like, really? Like, you're not sick of it yet? Okay, I'll do it. And I'm like, there's something here to it. And then the next thing you know, she's going through a next challenge. And so we came up with, so the first one's called Chava Poofy and the Magical Firewood. And then the second one just came about because she was going through another kind of transition and a challenge. And we used these characters to help her do that. We have 5 books or 5 stories in the series. And each one, like the fifth one, my daughter really struggled without us ever talking about death in a way that was like bad or scary or holding back. She lost a really close friend of hers, my daughter, who was almost like a grandmother to her, not by blood, who died of cancer. And she did not want to talk about it. And that's fine. We respected that. But at the same time, this inspiration came for, ooh, can we kind of just gently engage death through this? And the first time she heard that part, that one, I initially wrote the first draft to kind of engage her with it. She stopped 3/4 of the way through. It's like, I don't want to do it. I was like, okay, that's fine. It's too sensitive. A couple days later, she's like, okay, I want to hear the end. And she heard it, had tears flowing out of her eyes and stuff. And we worked on it to make it this thing that really fit. And I'll never forget, a year and a half later, she asks again, Daddy, can you tell me that story? I was like, sure, I'll tell you. I tell it to her. She goes, is that about Annie? And that's who it was who died. You know what I mean? It was like, without ever saying Annie, without saying the word death, without any of that, it just gave her something that she could play with, or we could reference, like, what would Chava do here? What would Poof? It's like, that's how these stories were used in these cultures. And I wish I had that.
Yeah.
And she's benefited from it. And then one day she's like, Daddy, I want to make this a cartoon. And I was like, okay, why don't we try to make it a book first and see if people respond to it? But she's homeschooled, and we said, all right, if we're going to do this, you're going to be involved in every part of the process. You're going to be in every meeting. It's not just me making this book. She's like, okay. She's very opinionated. She knows what she likes. And I kid you not, she worked with everything from budgeting. She helped build the website, do the videos to make we did a Kickstarter campaign. We had no idea what we were doing, thank God, because we found out afterwards that it's very difficult for most kids' books to get funded. We actually were successful with it. Found um, an amazing illustrator who oh, just we felt so gifted. And even that came about because we were working with an illustrator initially who at a certain point, like, this isn't working. But we're
Mm.
like, we need, for my daughter to see what that process is like of going, okay, this isn't working, but we need to honor the fact that we agreed to do something. And then again, how things unfolded, she had this, we say, fortunate conflict that no longer allowed her to continue with the project, which created room
Mhm.
for this other person to come through. And anyway, it's just been a magical story behind the story, and the story itself is really magical. So uh, I can talk. I didn't mean to talk this long, but
It's all good.
it's really, really amazing.
I love it. I can tell you're really passionate about it, and I love that. It's really infectious. And it sounds like wonderful books because I have three kids, and I know that like children's books, for the most part, yeah, they're superficial. And the ones that I have purchased to try to have more, maybe something, um, either emotional regulation or things that deal with anxiety or anything spiritual, or they they don't tend to be engaging enough to hold my kids' attention. There's been a couple that might have been okay, but it's not all the time. So having something that's engaging, that is more, like you said, like the Marvels, where it's like there's a big story behind it. There's all this emotion. There's all these other things. It's not just the lesson, which kids' books tend to focus on. It's just the lesson. So I feel that would be really wonderful and needed. It's
Mm.
it's different, and I like that. And I love that your daughter had such an active part of it, because I feel like that is also something that a lot of kids' books don't have. It's adults writing for kids. It's not kids writing for kids with just an adult to help. Because like I I think that's wonderful because kids can tell.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
But
I've learned so much through this process because sometimes I can be not only wordy, but yeah, it's just amazing how, like you said, kids know. And that's the thing. I think kids know so much more than we
mhm,
realize. But it's
for
almost
sure.
like they need it. The opportunity is to activate that in them in their little form
Mhm,
that they are. You know what I mean? And um, when it's one dimensional, it's us steering that process as
mhm,
adults versus letting them kind of like with my daughter in that fifth book in this series, or the fifth story, I should say, um, with the way it worked with her at the time that she needed. It wasn't sit down, we're going to talk about death, we're going to process our feelings and all that. It was, my mentor always said, let the story do the work.
mm,
The stories will work on you if you honor them the right way. And as a grown up, I've heard stories that are thousands of years old that I tell at retreats that I'll do with, by a campfire of a 6-year old next to a 55-year-old, and they're all sitting there and totally being, um, what's the word? Transformed by this story. And that's, if we can provide that for families, even to like 0.01%,
yeah.
it would be amazing because I feel like that's part of what's kind of missing, at least from a lot of the books that I've seen. There's occasional ones where you go like, okay, there's
Yes.
something there and you feel it. But we'll see what happens. But it's just been in and of itself, if nothing else happened, the journey to do this has been amazing. But I do feel deep in my heart that there's something here. And when we've showed the story to people, everyone's like, wow. And only a few people have seen the illustrations and they're like, wow. And then when people hear the story behind it, it's like, wow. And I'm like, we have 3 wows. That's a pretty good wow factor. So
Yeah.
hopefully, it'll, you never know. But, how for my daughter to see, okay, this is a dream. It took some work. We had to go through all kinds of challenges. We had to work together. We had to trust each other, trust other people, and so forth. Like, I feel so blessed and, such a great experience to have that.
Well, yeah, and to have for her to know that a thought, an idea can be transformed into reality is super amazing. And being able to experience that as a kid, as she grows up, she's going to have that knowledge, that belief, that knowing her, like that belief in herself, and that if I can do this, I've done it before, I can do it again.
Yeah.
That's a force that is so powerful. And oh, I'm excited to see how she shows up into the world as an adult. Because that's that energy, especially, I want to say like especially female, but
No,
traditionally it's
you're
been
right.
more male.
Yeah.
So having that dynamic shift and change and be able to spread out, like that feels really good. I'm really, really excited for her and you and your family.
I think it's funny. Can I share one other thing that just came up that
Go right ahead.
it's funny, and this is where we can overstep as grown-ups. So
Hmm.
the initial way we did it, it was just women. There was no father figure, anything else. Um, because in some ways that was me not pushing, we never talked about it, but it was just we kind of, I kind of guided that process a little bit because I was like, I'm so tired, like I said, of what I saw with girls can do it too, kind of thing, right? I'm just simplifying the way I'm phrasing it, but and I was like, I want, for lack of a better way to describe it, girl power without drawing attention to the girl power. It just is. They're characters that are doing their thing, right? And it wasn't until probably around the fourth story that my daughter was like, Daddy, where's Kava's dad?
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I was going through my own journey with the shamanic work about healing the wounded father figure and the extreme masculine energy, either super intense or, you know, basically the imbalanced masculine energy. And so you're like, oh. And so we found a way to go, no, we need him. We need him in there, and we need Poofies. And we need both. That's important to have for her, for the characters, and for people. And it was her. She wasn't sitting there going, "We need masculine energy." It was just a natural question to go, "Where is this? Is not here. Where
Mm-hmm.
is that?" And I think that especially, um, at least from what I've seen with my daughter, she showed up with that in much greater balance. She has this strong, I mean, the pregnancy was not easy. The delivery was really scary at the end there. And even the doctors are like, wow, this one's a fighter. She has that in her, but she has this feminine fierceness too, but it's totally different.
Mm-hmm.
And I love how you said it because um, yeah, I think the world needs more examples of that. And so I tell people, I'm like, if anything, I'm just screwing her up. Hopefully I don't screw her up too much, and she gets to where she needs to go or whatever it is and does her thing in the world and all that. But it's been a wild ride. And yeah, if without her, none of this, none of my own journey, none of it would have happened. So,
I love that.
yeah,
Kids have a way of really catapulting our, if we choose to accept that challenge,
yeah,
really catapulting us into going way further than what we could have ever imagined. It could either be like crush you down or expand you. Like I don't feel like I'm just gonna say like my children. They're a lot of people would have called them challenging or difficult children. But under that pressure, it's like you could either crumble and fall apart, or you could realize that when you are falling, breaking, crumbling, there's that space for rebirth to be who you want to be and being reborn. Um, so I think a lot of spiritual journeys come from that crumbling
oh, yeah,
because, yeah, just like in the forest, the tree falls, it dies, those mushrooms grow now. All those bacteria, they have something to eat. So it's just the fuel to help you grow.
yeah.
So,
That's right.
yeah. Kids. Oh, oh yeah. They
Exactly, exactly. Oh my goodness.
Uh, uh, so if somebody wanted to either work with you or if they wanted to learn more about you, buy a book, how can they get in contact with you? How can they find you?
So for me, just go to my website. So it's Magic and Awe. So Magic AND .com. That's all my information's there. That's a great place to start. And the book is Chava and Poofy, HAVA POOFY.com, chavaandpoofy.com. But um, yeah, that's the easiest way. There's a form on there. Reach out and happy to talk to whoever.
Perfect. Thank you so much for talking with me. I had a really wonderful time and it was great getting to know you.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, I've enjoyed this and I just love the space that you hold and the questions that you ask. And yeah, it's felt like 5 minutes. So thank you.
It did feel fast. All right. Thank you so much.